Hi everyone and welcome to a new tutorial. My name is Abdi for asART 3D and motion graphics, and in this tutorial I would like to show you how we can create a parametric light system in 3D Studio Max with RailClone using an asset from the Chaos Cosmos library, which are in this case these hanging lights I'm going to use. So I'm going to import that into my scene and close the guy. Now, in order to be able to use that in our RailClone setup, we have to break this model apart. So first, I'm going to import it as mesh and then delete the original. So I'm left with the high quality model. And now I can go and delete those things that I don't need, which are the first four lights. And then I'm going to select my model, add an edit poly modifier to that, and select the elements I don't need, which are those four lights for now. So now I go and turn off this light. Let me go and switch to clay mode. And now we can start to detach the elements and create the segments for our RailClone. So I'm gonna just select my top of the light here and detach that, and we can just call this segment light top. Next thing, I'm gonna select my wire and detach that as well, call that segment wire, and switch to my front view, go to edge selection tool, select all these edges and go to connect, give it 4 segments and set the pinch to something like 70 or something. So say OK. I can zoom in, go to my polygon selection tool, select all these polygons here and delete them, and select these polygons between those two segments and delete those as well. Now I can go and select all of that and go to detach and call that segment default. And the one which is left, we're going to rename it to segment start / end. So now we have all the segments we need for our RailClone. The next thing is aligning the pivot point. So select all of them, go to hierarchy, affect pivot only, and center to object. Now that centers everything to our objects here. Now we go and align the pivot points where we want them. For this head or light top, I'm gonna move my pivot point up to where the wire actually ends. This is right here somewhere. And for my wire, I'm gonna set that back to where it was, and that was on 0, which is that line over there. And for this guy, I'm gonna set the x-axis to 0 as well. The same for the end segment. But for the end segment, I would like to bring it to this edge. So I'm going to edit poly again, select all these vertices, and then go and copy the X position down here. Go back to my hierarchy, affect pivot only, and delete the X value and paste the value I just copied, which moves it to this end. And that is exactly what we need. So now we have everything aligned. We can go and add our RailClone object into our scene and create the parametric light system. So I'm gonna add the RailClone object into here. Go to modifier stack and open the styler. Before I open the styler editor, I'm going down here and activate use segment material, and then I go to my style editor where we can go and set up the whole thing. So now I'm gonna drag in a linear 1s generator and a segment, and I'm gonna select my wire as my segment and link this to default. I'm not gonna see anything unless I go and change the X value here. I'm gonna set it to 150 for now. Now you see it creates kind of a wall, which is actually not a wall, it is just the wire repeated until it hits the 150 centimeters length we defined here. But these guys are now facing the wrong way. They should be just flat, and one of them should be visible, just the way we need it. And in order to fix it, we can go and use a transform operator and drag it between the segment and the generator here, and then select the transform operator, go to its transform rollout, and set the rotation for the x-axis to -90, which will turn it the way we need it. Now we have to go to its pivot alignment, which is under general rollout, and then we can go down here, activate override alignment, and set every axis to pivot. So this will go and use the pivot point we just defined a while ago. Now we can zoom in here, select these two, shift drag them down, and go and select the segment here. Go to object and select our light top. And link this to the end. Now since we are using the same transform operator, we just copied that. Everything is aligned right away the way it should be. So the transform, the rotation is -90 as we had it here, and also the alignment is set to pivot for all the axes. So this is done for now. So the next thing would be creating the railing for all these lights. And for that, I'm gonna drag another generator, linear 1s generator, into my editor here. And for this, we're gonna use spline and a segment. Now I'm gonna draw a line in my scene. So from here to here somewhat. And I'm going to link my spline to the spline input and select my line as my spline. The segment that I have, I'm gonna link this to default and then assign the default segment to it. And this will go and distribute that segment all along the path, but the alignment is now on the bottom, so we have to change it so it will land on the top edge as we have it right here. So we can go select this again and use another transform operator, activate override alignment, and set the z-axis just to pivot, so that will move it down and align it with the top edge as we have defined for all these segments here. So next thing is adding the end and the start segment, which is this guy. We can go to our editor, select these guys again, shift drag them in order to make a copy, and now for the segments we go and select our start and end segment here and link that to our start input, which sets it right here, but as you can see the alignment is wrong, so it aligned it with the end of it. So we have to go to transform operator for this guy and set the X from automatic to pivot, so it will move it back and align it with this edge. Now since the end and start are the same, we can use the same segment for it, and we can go and link it to the end. But when I zoom in right now, we will see that that thing is attached, but it is facing the wrong way. So we have to flip that on the x-axis, and here we can use a mirror operator, bring it between the transform operator and the generator here for the end segment, and by default it automatically flips it on the x-axis. So now we have it the way we should. So the next thing is linking the lights which are generated in our first generator here to the second one, and we can do that by linking this generator to the evenly input of our second one. And we don't see the lights now, they just disappeared, and there is two reasons for that. First of all, we changed the direction here in the transform. It is set to -90. We have to change it back to 90 again, so use another transform operator between both of the generators here, and go to transform rollout rotation for the x-axis and set it back to 90, and we still don't see them, and that is because of the default evenly distant value which we can find when we select our second generator, go to rules rollout, and down here in the evenly segment or section you're going to see the mode distance, and the distance is set to 100, which is a pretty high value for what we have right now. So we can decrease that value. Let's go to 50, and that will bring back our lights. Now we see that they are displayed as box right now. We can change it when we go to the display rollout and change it to quick mesh. That will show you the original shape of the object here, and the alignment is wrong. So the z-axis, we have to go and change it to pivot again. So select the transform operator for the generator here, go to general override alignment, and then set the z-axis back to pivot. So that will move it back down where it belongs. And now we see a gap which is as big as our sphere down there. And we can close this gap by activating override fixed size and deactivating scale segment, and set the value for the z-axis to 0.01. So that will close the gap, but as you can see, it is also offsetting the lights. So in order to go and fix that offset, we can go to our transform rollout here and change the value for the x-axis under fixed translation. That will allow you to just offset it on the x-axis until you have them there where you need them. So we don't want to come back into editor and change it every time we need to adjust or to correct this value. What we can do to have a direct access to this value is exporting that parameter. So right click on the transform operator and then go to export parameters, and down here we go to fixed transform, fixed translation, and activate the x-axis and click OK. So this will give you an input for the x fixed translation. We can drag that out, go to parameters, select numeric, and set the type to unit or scene unit, and this will allow you to control this x offset right from the parameters rollout without opening the editor. So now I can go here and just change it to whatever I need, and that works fine. So the next thing is controlling the distance between the lights and by that we also define how many of those guys are actually hanging here, and we control that by going to the second generator and then rules rollout evenly distance. And again, we don't want to come back to the editor all the time to change this. So we can select our generator, right click, export parameters, go down to evenly distance, select it and say OK. So it gives you another input for evenly distance here. Now drag that out, parameters numeric, and set this to scene units as well. Now those guys, I want them to have a limitation, and that means right now the limitation is on 0. There is no limitation actually, and it will just go and generate as many lights or hanging lights as possible without having any distance between their pivot points, and that will give you bunch of lights and actually a pretty heavy scene because your amount of meshes will increase, etc. So in order to avoid it, we better make sure that those lights will never touch. And we can do that by using the diameter actually of that sphere that we have as the limitation value. So we can go and select the light top and then go to utilities stack, measure, and just go and find out what is the X or Y value for this sphere. And right now we have it somewhere around 12. So I can go and set the limitation for my minimum to something like 15. So I'm sure that those guys will never touch each other since distance is bigger than their diameter right now. So now we can't see it unless we go and select it and select the evenly distance here in the list and change the value real quick so it updates your RailClone setup. And now you can see we can't go any lower than 15. So 15 is the lowest value, and this is because we just limited that here in our evenly distant control. Now we don't want that to be evenly distant by the name here, so we're going to change it to lights distance, which makes more sense for now. So we see in that list X-fix translation and then the light distance. I'm going to rename the X-fix translation as well to X offset. So now we have the offset and the distance of the light. So I can go and increase it or decrease that, and that changes the amount of the light. And I can go and offset it so it will correct the position that I need. And of course, if we select the line, go to edit spline, and then change anything, so such as adding new segments to our spline or whatever, or changing its direction and so on. So that will all follow our path and generate all the lights along that path based on the settings we have for our distance and so on. So let me get rid of that real quick. Now, the next thing is controlling the length of this hanging light, which is now controlled by the X size of the first generator. And we have to change it here in order to have different length. But we don't want to come into our editor again. So we go and select the first generator, right click, export parameters, go to geometry and export X size, click OK. For this, we drag it out again, parameters, numeric, and set this to scene unit and limit that maybe with a 30 centimeters limitation for minimum value. So again, we select our RailClone, go to X size and change this real quick so it will update it. And now we can't go lower than 30 until we go here and change it to something else like 20 or something. Then that will work as well. Now we can change the height of the lights. But by now everything is the same length. And I can go, down to infinity. So we're going to change this as well because having a random length between all the lights will make it look much better, more interesting and more dynamic. But before we go to the randomness of the length of them, let me just go and set the maximum value to 150 so we can't go any higher than that. So this is the max we can go, and I don't think that we need to go any further than 150 centimeters. That's 1.5 meters. Okay, so now when we want to have some randomness in that height for the lights, what we can do is using a random operator and just link it to our X size. But still, if we go and change these values here, let's say to 30 and the maximum to 90 or whatever, everything is still the same height. And this is because of our settings here for the generate on. The generate on is set to start. Now we have to change it to segment, and that will allow us to see the randomness of what we are setting here. We can also use the custom seed and just change this value to get some interesting results and tweak it by changing all that here. So now we want to control these values from here as well. So we can go to the random operator, right click on it, export parameters, and now export the minimum maximum for scene units since we have to set this to seed units as well. So again, right click, export scene units, then OK. Now we go and select the numeric control, shift drag it down twice, so we have 3 copies in total. And now link them to minimum input, maximum input, and the seed. And for the seed controller, we set it back to integer. So we don't need the unit, the scene unit for that. Now let me select the minimum controller. We have 20 and 150 here. And here we have the same, which is fine. And now we can go into our list and change these values. So we can set the minimum to something like 30 and then the maximum to something like, I don't know, 90 or something. And these are the results. We can go to our seed and change that, and everything works fine. So the last thing we have to do is adding the V-Ray light. In my case, if you have V-Ray, if you have another render engine, so that will be your light with your Corona, whatever you're using. Just select your light source, and we want to make this a part of our setup here. And in order to do that, we just go to our light top, Select the light top and the transform operator and shift drag it down. And now select our object, which is our light in our layer list. So now we have to combine the light top and the light source to one single mesh in our RailClone setup. And for this, we're going to use compose operator, unlink the light head or light top from the end input and link it to the first input of the compose operator, and link the light source to the second input of the compose operator, and select the compose operator and make sure that the mode is set to grouped. Now we can go and link the compose operator to the end input here, and now we will see that everything is offsetted again and the alignment is wrong. This is because the compose operator will break the alignment and set it back to default, which is automatic. And now we have to go back to our list, add another transform operator and activate override alignment and go and change everything back to the pivot point. So that will fix this issue. Okay, so now if we go to our front view and zoom in a little bit, you will see that line, this square. I hope you see that. This is actually the light source that is now part of our system here, and it's set on that pivot point where we had defined for our light ball here, or light end or top. So we can go and change it because that will emit light towards the roof and the bottom will be dark, which is the wrong way around. So we have to move these light sources down here in order to create the right lighting effect. So for this, we can go to our transform and we can go to our transform rollout and change the amount of the x-axis to some values like plus 6, 7 or something. So until you see that what happens here, it moves it down here when I increase the value. So this is now out of the sphere. So we have to place it somewhere around 6 centimeters, so like that. Now we want to control this offset again from our list. So we can go here and then right click, go to export parameters, and then we go here to fixed transform, fixed translation, and export x-axis. Drag it out, go to parameters numeric, and set that to scene unit. And now we can go and rename it to light source position. And when I select my RailClone, I get the light source position here, and now I can go and change it directly from my list without having to open the editor over and over again. And this is actually it. Now we can go and select all these segments, move them to a new layer and call it segments. Let's go and hide them. Now I can go select my line, and this is what defines the position of our light here. Let's bring it up to 230 and go and create a wall maybe. There we go. Now we can go and render this in Vantage and see what we get as our results. Here we are in Vantage, and now I have my light here. I can go to my V-Ray light and change the intensity of it. And that works perfectly with my setup here. So we can go and select the RailClone and now change the light distance, for example, like this. Or we can change the speed of the length of the light, etc. until you have something you are happy with. So this is the end of this tutorial. I hope this is helpful and useful to you, and I'm wishing you a great and successful time. See you next time. Bye bye.